Welcome to South Carolina Live at the Voice of College Football, episode 41. I'm your host, Walker Gaskins, and we have quite a lot of things to talk about. We're going to be breaking down some position groups today, going to be talking about some staff movements, as well as some other things. But first, before you do anything, if you're on X watching, thank you for watching, but please follow my account. You get the weekly shows here, but you also get timely updates by the day, by the hour, and oftentimes by the minute for all things Gamecock football. And if you haven't subscribed to the channel here, I encourage you to like the video, share it, subscribe, of course, put on the notifications. It only helps support me and the Voice of College Football Network, but also gives you more Gamecock football content. But with that being said, we have a lot of things to talk about today. Firstly, I want to take a breakdown and kind of an early analysis of this offensive line room. What should we be expecting heading into spring ball, which is around a month away? So for some context, before we start getting into the projection of the lineups and everything, so we hired a new offensive line coach, Randy Clements, around mid-December from TCU, coming along with our new offensive coordinator, Kendall Briles, and he's a veteran in college football, 23 plus years of coaching offensive lines across the country, North Texas, Ole Miss, TCU, North Carolina. And he comes in after a disastrous 2025 season where we allowed SEC high 43 sacks. And Lonnie Teasley was fired midseason. I believe 43 sacks is the third worst in FBS, only in front of Ball State and Troy. So as a Power 4 team, as an SEC team, it's absolutely pitiful. But Clements, if you look at what his early comments have been and this attitude he's had, he's emphasized development and strong competition as he comes in with our new offensive coordinator, Kendall Briles. So considering this new offensive line coach, this new offensive coordinator, and really this entire revamp on the offensive side of the ball in general, I wouldn't head into spring ball with any mindset whatsoever that guys from the past may have a sort of edge at the start of the offseason, because we're in a slightly different situation. If you look at schools where they kept their offensive line coach from the year before, you would think, okay, well, some guys, they may be talented transferring in, but they don't have the experience in that relationship with this coach that's already at the program. But with a new offensive line coach coming in, it's basically been a clean slate. So I wouldn't hold, maybe outside of Josiah Thompson, any weight to the fact that players been here, other than just them being used to what it's like being in Columbia. But with that being said, let's start getting into the breakdown of this offensive line and kind of my projections heading into spring ball. So I'm going to go ahead and share the screen with you, made a Google Sheet here. So for as of those who are looking, for the blue that are going to be highlighted, that's all of our transfer offensive linemen, such as Jacarius Peak, Armando Nieves, Seth Smith, Dane Arnett, etc. The ones in green is our returning offensive linemen who were in Columbia last year, such as Shed Surratt, Nolan Hay, Marquis Anderson, Josiah Thompson. And then the yellow is our high school offensive linemen, the guys who just came in from the high school ranks. That's going to be in yellow, such as Darius Gray, Zion Giles, and Anthony Baxter. So my first point I want to make here is, well, actually, I'm going to go ahead and just read it off for you. My projected starting lineup on the offensive line heading into spring ball. Once again, I want to make it clear that this is final. This is my absolute certain shot here. This is just an early projection based off of my educated guess and just kind of looking at the room, looking at what these guys bring to the table. I would have Jacarius Peak starting at left tackle, backed up by Armando Nieves. At left guard, I would have Shed Surratt, who played left guard last year for the Gamecocks, backed up by the five-star recruit Darius Gray. Carter Miller at center, backed up by Gamecock last year Nolan Hay. Right guard, Emmanuel Poku from ECU, backed up by a longtime Gamecock Marquis Anderson. And then at right tackle, Josiah Thompson, backed up by one of our transfer offensive tackles, Seth Smith. So my first point I want to make here is Carter Miller at center. So as a redshirt junior, he has plenty of proven starting experience. He transferred here from UCF in the offseason in January. And when you go and look back at this, I mean, he's solid in pass pro. He's solid in run blocking. But I'd give him the starting nod here, not just because he's a veteran at the center position, not because he's solid in both of these, but when you look at the type of offense that UCF was trying to run last year, it was a little more up tempo. I'm not saying it was very fast, as fast as you might see a Bryles spread offense that where he's probably going to be running this year, but it was a little more up tempo than what we've seen, especially from South Carolina the past year or so, especially last season. So you might be asking, what does that have to do with anything? Well, I think part of what's going to be required from this offensive line is going to be able to get on your butt or get off your butt and move after every play, be rushing down the field, taking advantage of when the defense is caught off guard. And I think Carter Miller has a little bit of experience doing that at UCF. And just when you combine that with his solid production, with his veteran experience, this guy's played 3-4 years of college ball. I would probably put him at the starting position. Now, what does that mean for Nolan Hay? If you don't know about Nolan Hay, came to the Gamecocks last year. Last year was his first season in Columbia in 2025. He redshirted last year. He used his redshirt year. So he started 2 games, both at center, but he played in 4 of them. Also faced some injuries and stuff. So with Carter Miller at center, that pushes Hay, who I think is a reliable returner, considering what happened last year, into the backup position. But of course, this creates real competition during spring practice. So I think the center position, who's going to be that lead communicator and that leader on that offensive line to hold everybody together when it's 3rd and long, in Death Valley or wherever it's going to be, we're going to be playing next year. I think that's going to be something to be watching heading into spring ball. But right now, my early projection would be Carter Miller. So my next note is, I think this is probably the one most people identified whenever I was going over my projected lineup, is Josiah Thompson. Now, you might be asking, well, why is Josiah Thompson at right tackle? Now, I personally think, despite the fact he has been a left tackle for years with the Gamecocks, with 2 years now, I think we're going to kick him out to right tackle to play on the other side of the offensive line. So some might be asking, well, why not back up Jacarius Peak? And I would say that's, in my opinion, a waste of talent. When you look at Josiah Thompson, he's the only returning starter with significant upside, with that ability to where you can plug him in and start him, and you're not as worried, at least as worried as comparison if you put in a lot of these other guys, because he's played at South Carolina in the SEC against Power 4 competition for 2 years now. So he's probably the only returning guy you bring in who you have that confidence with. And then, this guy's built for the SEC. 6'7", 305 pounds, and his athleticism, it would just make him a very strong bookend opposite of Peak. And we've seen Thompson's ceiling before. He's been, during times where the offensive line has been absolutely atrocious, Thompson was often the only somewhat good thing you had to say about that line as you left that game. And we also saw in his freshman season in 2024, when he finished with a 9-4 record, he was a freshman All-American. So I think, considering the fact that he went into the portal and that he decided to come back to Carolina, Shane Beamer addressed that and kind of explained a little bit from his side during his last press conference last week. It almost feels like it'd be a waste of talent if you weren't starting him somewhere. And of course, I don't think you can start him over Jacarius Peak. Now, if a spring ball happens and we go through drills and it turns out Josiah is the better than Peak, I think that's going to be very interesting. I think that surprised me a little bit because Peak was the number 1 offensive tackle in the transfer portal. We've seen his production at NC State. I think you move him out to right tackle. We kind of need a solid guy there, and I think that'd be a great veteran and very high-skilled presence opposite of Peak. But speaking of the tackle position in general, the tackle talent we have, I think, is going to be a very noticeable difference compared from the years past with Tree, Babalade, and Kaysen Henry. Because, just starting on the left tackle, Peak's the clear favorite, of course. But then on the right, like we said, you bring in Thompson. But the thing is, one thing I like is you have guys who are going to be good starters, but also you have some guys under them who are going to get great opportunities to learn from them and really push them during spring practice, such as Seth Smith, who came in from the FCS, but I really like what he's done there. You got some early guys such as Giles, a four-star freshman who has shown some very, very high upside traits during his high school times. And then, of course, you have guys who've been here for a couple of years, such as like a guy like Blake Franks. So when it comes to the tackle position, I think I have a little bit more positivity about it on the high side of it. But when it comes to the depth part, I'm also not as panicky as I would feel in years past, considering, and of course, depth. If you don't think about that as a Carolina fan, well, sorry, I don't really know what you're doing, because as you've seen in years past, especially in like 2023, our offensive line gets beat up on pretty good as the season progresses. But I know I just spent probably 5, 6, 7, or 8 minutes talking about the tackle position. But one thing I want to point out is this interior offensive line. And what I want to specifically talk about is the guard positions. Shed Surratt, Darius Gray, Emmanuel Poku, Marquis Anderson, I think these left guard and right guard positions are going to be noticeably better. At least that's what it comes off the potential to be, noticeably better during spring ball and possibly this upcoming season. Now you may ask, why do I say that? I mean, firstly, speaking on the right guard position, you bring in Emmanuel Poku, big physical guy from ECU. He anchors that right guard position, if you ask me. 6'5", 320 pounds. I've had some conversations with him. That guy is ready to compete. And he also has a ton of experience in games. I mean, he started the last 26 games for East Carolina. His freshman year before that, he played in 9 of them. That's 35 games in the past 3 seasons with the Pirates. That is some experience, and that is some depth and talent that you can't find throughout the transfer portal everywhere. And then backing him up is a guy in Marquis Anderson from Roebuck, South Carolina. I'm pretty sure he went to Dorman High School. He's been with this Gamecock program since like 2023. 6'4", 320 pounds. And I would honestly say that out of all the years where maybe besides like 2023, whenever he came in and was battling with other freshmen such as Tree, Babalade, and Trevon Ball, I'd say right now this is probably his greatest shot at starting at the right guard position. And if not, this is still a guy who has experience at South Carolina who would be a great depth piece. And then, so obviously I'm excited about the right guard position. I think Poku, if he starts at the right guard position heading into next season, I think is going to be great. But also on the opposite side with this left guard position as well. Shed Surratt, if you don't know about him, last year he was our starting left guard. 6'4", 325 pounds, 9 starts, but played in 10 games as a true freshman in 2025. So heading into last year, just less than 6 months ago, he just graduated from high school. But he goes in, he makes 9 starts for the Gamecocks in 2025 against multiple different Power 4 teams, SEC teams, and he holds his own. There was often times where I looked back and I was like, well, Shed Surratt might have been one of the few guys who actually did somewhat okay despite a bad offensive performance. So I really like Surratt. I think his performance last year is, I wouldn't say to the same level as what I would give Josiah Thompson's freshman year in 24, because Josiah Thompson was an All-American and he was just stellar that year, especially as a freshman. But Shed Surratt was pretty close to that, if you ask me. I really like what we're bringing back with him. And then, of course, if you don't see just come back to this again, I could easily see Darius Gray being that backup left guard heading into next season. I mean, you bring in the number 1 interior offensive lineman in the country, a 5-star recruit, number 1 player in his state. It's hard for a guy like that, especially when you look at what people have said about Gray. He's a quick learner, fast, physical, just ready to compete and ready to fight. I mean, I have very high hopes for Gray. I have very high hopes for Gray. I have very high hopes for this left guard position, for both guard positions. And the reason I'm also excited about that is not only are you better in pass protection, of course, you don't have guys coming up the middle all the time and getting Lenore Sells before he can scramble outside the pocket, but also what does that mean for the run game as well? There were so many times last season where Rasul Faison or whoever was running up the middle on, I don't know why we kept on calling plays right up the middle, but we did, and they'd get stuffed. Offensive linemen obviously couldn't run block as well. Defensive linemen would get right through. But I think with the right offseason and with the right development, if things click next year, we might see where instead of getting half a yard on those plays or we lose yards, we could get 2 yards on those plays, 3 yards, 4 yards. I think that also has some very good implications for the run game between the tackles. Now, my overall vibe for this offensive line is immediately you can tell, I feel like we're going to lean on the transfers for immediate impact, such as Peak, such as Miller, Poku. I think one of the things we're going to be able to do if we kick out Josiah to right tackle, which I think we should, is we protect him as a key returner and key talent. And if these guys gel the right way and have the right offseason, which from what I would obviously have to see it to believe it, that's why we play the games. But right now I'm more glass half full on it. We could have a pretty veteran and physical offensive line, one of the more physical lines in the SEC next year, if these guys gel in the spring. Because one thing that I kind of noticed after I kind of made my projected starters was Ja'Carri's Peak. This is at least his 4th or 5th year of college football. Shed Surratt, okay, it's his 2nd year. He's definitely the youngest guy here. But last year as a freshman, he didn't just get his feet wet. He dove right in, played in 10 games, and played pretty well, if you ask me, when you look at what he had to deal with on that offensive line beside him, and also the fact that he was a freshman. Carter Miller, multi-year starter, 4th or 5th year of college football. Same thing with Poku. Josiah Thompson's now in his 3rd year of college football, all at the University of South Carolina. And this feels different than years past, where last year it felt like we had a little bit of a younger offensive line. The year before, we had Tree and Tro starting, or that might have been 2023, excuse me, Tree and Tro coming in as freshmen, and obviously they held their own and they did good, but they didn't play to the same level you would see normally out of a veteran guy. And everything, and what I noticed about this offensive line is just, hypothetically, let's say I'm right. I go 5 for 5 on my projected start. I see guys who are big, height and size-wise. I'm pretty sure all of them are over 300 pounds, at least 6'3", 6'4". Guys who know how to play college ball, especially in the Power 4 level, besides Poku. And the guys who just they have experience starting as well. They haven't just played here and there, played pickup games as games got blown out late. They have that starting and veteran experience, and they seem like physical guys, not just size-wise, but their athleticism and their ability to compete on the field. So I'm really looking forward to this offensive line group. When people ask me what group I'm most looking forward to, like which one I think might take the biggest jump, I think the obvious answer is the offensive line, and that's for a good reason, right? I mean, especially with last year, I remember I had Chris Marlar on a couple weeks ago. He said the offensive line is probably going to feel like a big jump because how do you get worse than what you saw in 2025? And I think there's validity to that. I absolutely do. When you go rock bottom, anything else next year is probably going to feel like a big step up. But I don't think that that's going to be the sole reason we're impressed with this offensive line next year. I think these guys have some real potential with the right offseason, with the right coaching, with the right fall camp and everything to be a very good, if not very underrated offensive line in the 2026 year. Now you might be asking, okay, this is all great. The projections are cool, but what's this mean for spring ball? So I'll give you some context. So I imagine Coach Clements is going to be installing his system, of course. Likely, you're probably going to see he's probably going to bring some stuff in he's used at TCU, Ole Miss, wherever he's been, especially in the places he's been with Kendall Briles. And one thing I want to say is pass protection is going to be key for these guys. We saw last year how much of a bad's understating how bad our offensive line was last year, how much a bad offensive line can mess up a quarterback and the offense, even when you have a superstar like Lenore Sellers, even when you see all the missed tackles and all the crazy stuff he does in the backfield to make a play, even with a guy like Sellers, a bad offensive line, at some point you just can't get past that. But also one thing I think that they're going to put a big emphasis on is mistake-free football. I think that's something you should be looking out for. I think that's something that the coaching staff will be looking out for, because you go back to some of these games, such as the Texas A&M game, the Clemson game, Ole Miss, LSU. I mean, obviously we're playing bad offensively, but despite that, a lot of these were, I think all of them were actually fourth quarter battles. And what is one thing that we did the entire game that eventually got to us in the fourth quarter is we played a ton of mistake football, also against the Missouri game where we had like over 100 yards of penalties. I mean, it felt like we shot ourselves in the foot so many times last season we didn't have any more toes. And we cannot afford to do that again if they want the 2026 season that not only they are hoping for, but we are hoping for. They need to play some mistake-free football. We can't have those holding penalties rampant like last year. It felt like last year Sellers was either getting sacked or he made a play, but it got called back because of holding. We can't have that next year. We have to get rid of these negative plays that kill our momentum and just push us back farther out of field goal range, out of fourth and go for it range. We have to get rid of those. So I think that's going to be something that we should all be hoping for and be looking at heading into spring ball. So make no doubt about it, there's going to be some heavy competition. I don't think anyone is guaranteed the starting spot. Of course, that's always been a standard here, but I think this is going to be more so than ever. I would say if I had to make any general assumptions about who would be starting, I would say Jacarius might be the only somewhat safe assumption I would even try to make at left tackle. I don't think you bring in a guy like that just for him not to start. I'm not saying they promised him the starting position. Shane Beamer's made that very clear. I'm not saying he's lying. I just think that that'd probably be the only safe assumption I would make. But other than that, let's go see. Let's just sit back and watch and let's see. And honestly, if these guys, young guys like Darius Gray, like Zion Giles, we've seen freshmen at South Carolina on the offensive line take a rise, such as I talked about with Shed Surratt, Tree Babalay, Trevon Ball, who transferred away from Columbia this past offseason. So, I mean, don't be shocked if you see their names rise up as well. So that was the offensive line. I think that was the obvious position group that most people have been looking for. But I want to discuss, honestly, my personal favorite group. I was talking with Hale McGranahan last episode, or 2 episodes ago. If you want to go watch that, it was a great episode. He had some very insightful and very good things to add on, and I encourage you to go watch that. He's a great guy. But in that show, I mentioned that the group I'm most looking forward to, that isn't obvious answers like wide receiver, offensive line, would be this running back room. So we're going to be doing a little breakdown and projection similar to what we just did with the South Carolina Gamecocks running back room. So in the same kind of style we were doing it before, the highlighted blue right here are the transfer running backs, and the green are the returning running backs, and then the yellow is the high school running backs. Now, the first thing you might be noticing is, where's the high school running backs? And the answer I would give to you is, well, NA literally means NA, not available. We didn't sign a single high school back. That is part of the reason I believe why Markel Blackwell, our former running backs coach, was fired, because I think this was his second year in a row where he wasn't able to get a back out of the high school ranks. But I also don't think it was just because of that. I also think South Carolina knew that with especially how the running backs performed last year, you don't want to bring in a guy who might take a year or two to develop. You already have guys who you're trying to develop, such as Matthew Fuller, Isaiah Augustave, and Jawarren Howell. You want to bring in some guys who have the potential to make some instant impact, who have already had experience in a college system at the college level. So I think, of course, once again, nothing's set in stone. I'm not telling you this is right, go bet money on it, get a second mortgage and bet the house on it. This is just my guess, educated guess. I think Matthew Fuller, heading in spring ball and possibly next season, is going to be running back one. if fate of the universe on the line, I had to make a pick for next season this far out, I would say Matthew Fuller. But running back 2, I think Christian Clark. Christian Clark, I really like what he's done. We're going to get into that in a minute. And then Jawarn Howe at running back 3 and Jabri Coleman at running back 4. So I'm going to go running back by running back and kind of give my thoughts on this. First thing I like to say is, of course, Matthew Fuller, running back 1. I think when you look at Fuller, he just seems like the clear-cut program guy at South Carolina. And I think he has the similar advantage here to Josiah Thompson on the offensive line, where it's like, yes, they're bringing in a new coach at that position. It's kind of a clean slate offensively. However, this is one of the guys who it'd almost feel like a disservice to the idea of college football talent if he isn't getting at least a certain amount of snaps next season. But he's coming off of a solid 20-25 year as a freshman. I mean, 72 carries for 260 yards and 2 touchdowns is not bad, especially when you look at the context of last year. But that 72-yard touchdown run versus LSU that launched him into the spotlight for South Carolina fans, I think really made everybody go, whoa. I mean, look at what this guy can do. This guy has the potential where that run he had against LSU last season, I thought was very similar to the touchdown runs that Rocket Sanders had against Texas A&M. I believe it was in the second half in 2024, or that run he had in the second half against LSU in 2024 when College Game Day was in town. I remember watching that play. It was electric. It was amazing. That felt a very similar vibe, not just, of course, in the vibe, but also just the way it happened with his ability to knock the first guy over and make a sharp cut and use his speed and athleticism to race down the sideline for the touchdown. So not only do I like Fuller because he's a rough, bruising, hard to bring down style kind of running back, I think similar to what we saw out of Rocket Sanders, Kevin Harris, if you remember him from 2021. But I think he also provides just a little bit of the little continuity you have in a room where we've brought in at least 3 or 4 transfers. So Matthew Fuller is my favorite right now for the running back 1 spot heading into spring ball. But the second guy I also really like, transfer running back from an SEC foe, Christian Clark, transferred in from Texas this offseason during the portal cycle. And obviously, like I just said, he brings a proven SEC-level experience and physicality from Texas, from the Texas Longhorns. And I think that even if Clark is running back 2, or for the sake of the argument, what I'm about to say is running back 1 and Fuller is running back 2, I don't really see this trying to figure out how to word this. I don't see running back 1 and 2, and possibly you want to include 3 in there for the fun of it. I don't see it as similar where running back 1 is going to get 60% of the snaps, running back 2 is going to get 30%. I could very easily see this as a similar dynamic to the Rocket Sanders and Oscar Attaway situation in 2024. Now, what do I mean about that? I mean, you have a guy who seems like an obvious starter or running back 1 anywhere he would go, such as Matthew Fuller, similar to Rocket Sanders, if you ask me, but also Christian Clark reminds me of Oscar Attaway in a way where it's almost like it feels like he's just wasting away if he's sitting on the bench. Like, you want to get him involved in the game, whether it's just to give Fuller a second to breathe, whether it's just a change of pace, trying to mess with the defense. Clark has the ability to make plays. And you saw this against Michigan in the Citrus Bowl. Texas was playing Michigan, and this was his first career start. And I'll read you his stats real quick. 20 carries, 105 yards, and 1 touchdown. And I believe he had maybe a dozen or so, maybe 20 receiving yards as well. So I think for your first carry in your freshman year against a Michigan team where we all know has, especially in the past decade or so, had a really good run defense, I think that's impressive. And when you also look at the context, of course, where this is a game where Arch Manning ran for 160 yards and 2 touchdowns, the fact I think that Clark was able to do this still, I think is also very impressive. So I really like Christian Clark. I really like the dynamic we could see in this running back room. And I'm more of a glass half full type of guy at this position group. I really I have a good feeling about it. The same feelings where I've had a few times during the Beamer era. I think I have a good feeling about this. And if I'm wrong, then I'll call myself out about it 6 months from now or 8 months from now. But as of right now, I tend to be not a sunshine pumper, but from the realm of hypotheticals and just early observations and guesses, I tend to be more on the positive side of it. So, okay, Roger Scott, there's no stability on the offensive side of the ball because it's a new staff and offense. Yes, I absolutely agree. First of all, thank you for being here. Roger, I appreciate you commenting, of course. Yeah, I agree. I absolutely agree. I just to reiterate it again, these are all just guesses. If I'm wrong, if I go 0 for 4 on this running back room prediction or 0 for 5 on the starting offensive line, I don't want to make an impression that I try to predict exactly. Like, obviously, I'd be a little embarrassed if I go 0 for 4 or 0 for 5, right? I think that would be a little silly, but I think that the people who are trying to make expectations this early, who are trying to make like solidified guesses and things like that, I think it's a little premature. There's the same thing to where I really don't like the way too early top 25 rankings. I really don't like those early rankings before we've even got to spring ball. I usually will start tolerating that and participating after spring ball solely because of the fact, like, I get it's entertaining. I get we do it for the fun of things, but it's just a shot in the dark, if you ask me. If you look at the way too early top 25 or heading into spring ball top 25s from the years past, obviously it's pretty much nowhere close to where you would see the preseason right before week 1 top 25s, mid-season top rankings. I mean, it's anywhere. And especially with this new staff and this new offense, like Roger said, it's going to be very interesting. I think it's going to be very fluid. I'm just trying to take a very go with the flow kind of mindset, very observatory mindset with this offense, solely because of the fact, as completely new guys, it's an entire revamp on the offensive side. So I'm very looking forward to that. And then Roger said, show you off one more time. Glad to be here. Wait for your broadcast. Keep up the good work. I tell everyone I know to look for you. Thank you, Roger. I appreciate the support. Of course, it's much appreciated. And for those who are also watching, I see we have 18 watchers right now. I encourage you to follow me on X. Obviously, we do weekly shows here, and I also live stream on the X accounts if you're watching from there. Thank you. But also follow. I encourage you to follow, turn on the notifications. That's where you get not just weekly college football content, but daily, hourly, and oftentimes by the minute updates on whether it's recruiting stuff or just Gamecock athletics in general as it relates to football. Things like that. I encourage you to follow me on there. And of course, subscribe to the channel, South Carolina, the voice of college football. Come support me. Come support the Voice of College Football Network. We love to have you here. We love to be able to talk about Gamecock football with y'all. But heading into the running back 3 position, Juwan Howe, I think, is a solid guess, a solid pick for who would you put at the RB3 position. And this is a guy who's familiar with the program. He's been here since 2024. He was the running back 3 for Oscar Attaway and Rocket Sanders that season. And he has some good size, 6'1", 225 pounds. And although his contributions in the 25 campaign were limited, they're very efficient. He had almost 6 yards per carry. I think it might have been 5.7 yards per carry, something around that, but it was almost 6. So I think this makes him a great kind of mid-depth piece. Obviously, he's kind of needs a little bit of a breakout type of a moment before we can kind of elevate him any higher, if you ask me, despite the fact he's one of the older guys, or he might be the oldest guy in that room. But one thing I like about him is he provides power, strength, a lot of similar to Matthew Fuller, a lot of the bruising, running over type of guy, and some reliability, as a veteran, a little bit of a better change of pace. I could see him in some change of pace type of offense, give you let your guys, other running backs come get their breath back for a second. And I think it's refreshing to have a guy like Howell and a guy like Fuller and a guy like Isaiah Augustave who are in-house returners who you're already familiar with and you know their character. Even if you're bringing a new coaching staff, the rest of the coaches, Shane Beamer and everyone else, they're familiar with these guys and how they operate, not just on the field, but also mentally off the field as well. And then for our running back 4 position, honestly, as we get closer to this end right here, just take it with a grain. Even if you had 1 grain of salt, you might as well throw it out the window and just keep walking, because anyone could easily be here. Any one of these guys could shoot up to maybe running back 1 or something. It'd probably surprise me a little if the guys that didn't list would do it, but I wouldn't be absolutely stunned by any means, and especially as we get farther down the depth chart. So if you don't know about Jabri Coleman, he had some elite traits, some very highly sought after abilities in high school. And he transferred here from Penn State, followed his coach, Stan Drayton, who is my personal favorite hire of the offseason. Not saying it's like the best or whatever. I'm not trying to get into that, but that's just my personal favorite, Stan Drayton. So hope to meet him one day. But he comes in with Drayton. Drayton's familiar with him. And I could easily see this guy. He has some explosive ability, I think. And I think he's going to compete real hard this spring. How often do you get to transfer to a new school where the running back coach already knows you? Now, I'm not saying there's going to be any bias or anything, of course. Obviously not. But also that gives you a little bit of an advantage when the running back coach kind of already knows how you operate. I think y'all are tracking what I'm saying here. But at running back 4, it could easily be him. It could easily be Isaiah Augustave, who transferred from Colorado, I think 2 years ago. Sam Williams-Dixon from Ohio State, who, although he didn't get much when you look at the box score or the stat sheets, just look at who he's behind, right? Of course, it's hard for anybody to have impressive stats when you're behind the type of guys he was behind at Ohio State. So overall, with the vibe here, I think this is a very well rebuilt room. I think it's underappreciated, and I would probably say underrated running back room right now. I believe it's kind of more of a committee type of room instead of just a 1-star back, who I think a lot of people were hoping for during the transfer portal window and that whole offseason cycle. So I have a good feeling about this. I've already stated here, it could be similar to Rocket Sanders, Oscar Attaway, and Jawan Howell type of situation in 2024. But, Stan Drayton has experience with kind of running back committees and duos before. Look at 2024 at Penn State. Excuse me. Look at 2024. That's the year they made the college football playoff semifinals. Nicholas Singleton and Katron Allen both rushed for over 1,000 yards. Now, I'm not saying – hold on. So pump the horses here. I'm not saying they're both about – our top 2 running backs are about to rush for over 1,000 yards. What I'm saying is that's the type of running back room I imagine under Stan Drayton, because that's the type of running back room he has shown us over the past couple of years. So I like the depth we have at this room. Obviously, it could be stronger. I know a lot of people see this in possibly a weak point by any stance. Also, if you haven't known, we brought in a new walk-on running back class of 2026, Ethan Kellum, I believe is an in-state guy. So congrats on him coming into the program. That's another thing I posted on X if you want to keep up with all Gamecock recruiting and stuff like that. So like I said at the beginning of this room, or the beginning of this segment, I'm more of a glass half full type of guy. And if 6 to 8 months from now I end up being wrong about this room, so be it. Then I'll get clipped, whatever, get called out. I'm willing to take that risk because I like what we see here. But like I did with the offensive line, you're probably wondering what's the context for the spring. So like I said, similar to Clements, Drayton, Stan Drayton, I think he's going to look at everyone fresh. No automatic spots, of course. And I think this is also going to be a very, very tough and very entertaining competition during spring ball. And honestly, I like – the thing is, I'm at the point where, I like all of these guys, right? I have nothing against these guys. If I had to pick my quote-unquote favorite, I guess it's Matthew Fuller because of what I saw in that game against LSU and because of the fact he's been here for a year. But, I wouldn't mind if any one of these guys started. If they're the best running back, if they need to be running back 1, However, Stan Drayton needs to do this in order to help this offense and this team win in 2026, so be it. I'm kind of at the point where it would take a lot for me to start questioning Coach Drayton because, I mean, you have to get better than what we were last year. 2025, bottom of the SEC, and basically it felt like almost every single rushing category. 111.1 yards per game on the ground last year. 111. The second worst under Shane Beamer. You may be asking which season was the worst. 2023. We averaged like 84, and we all remember how that season went. So, of course, this has to get better, not only from obviously you want the rushing to get better, the rushing performance, but you want to keep your offense on the field and not get your defense tired out. That was a big thing where I think our defense started letting up in the second half in the fourth quarter last year because they were playing over 30 minutes a game. Of course, you're going to get tired and start making more mistakes. But also you need to help Lenore Sellers. If the defenses you're playing against, all they have to do is have their DBs play 8-10 yards back on Nick Harbor and Jaden Gibson, and they don't have to worry about any running back whatsoever, and they can blitz Lenoris or just put a quarterback spy on him. It's going to be very similar to the issues we saw last year. It's going to be very similar. It's going to lead to a lot of frustration. But if we can add another aspect of this offense to where the defense has to kind of take some attention away from Lenoris or away from Nick Harbor or away from Jaden Gibson, away from Donovan Murph or Jaden Sellers or any of the tight ends we have, I think this rushing attack, how well this running back room performs is not just – the success isn't going to be implicated in just that room in general. What they do, I think, is also going to mean a lot for what we see in every other position group for this offense. And I think with the scheme tweaks, with Kendall Briles coming in and hopefully with the offensive line improving, I think it is going to get better. So I hope you enjoyed the offensive line and running back room analysis. I'm going to go ahead and remove this real quick. Let's get this fixed. Okay, so before we get into the next segment, because we had some staff changes I kind of want to discuss, once again, please like and subscribe, follow the channel, follow the X page. I encourage you to weekly, daily, hourly, and oftentimes by the minute Gamecock football content. But also, I'm going to be posting later this week another post asking what position groups you want to see broken down. Obviously, we just did the offensive line room, the running back room. I encourage you, once this live stream ends, or as I'm talking right now, type in what position groups you'd like to see. If you follow me on X, which I encourage you to do, of course, reply to my post there, what position group you want me to break down. I want to cover what you guys want to know about, not just me randomly spin a wheel or decide what's my favorite or what I'm most interested in. I want to break down what you have questions about heading into spring ball. So just a moment for thought about that. But, excuse me. Next, shifting away from the players finally, right? It seems like it's been 40 minutes. We've been having a good episode so far. If you haven't been aware or haven't learned in the past couple of days or so, there's been some more staff changes with the University of South Carolina football team. South Carolina's assistant quarterback coach, Mike Anthony, has been hired as the offensive coordinator at Appalachian State. I certainly didn't hear any rumblings about this before it happened. I didn't hear any rumblings from anyone else in the Gamecock media. So I think it's very interesting because just for context, Anthony, who arrived in Columbia in January, by the way, so less than a month ago, is now joining Dow Loggins' program at App State. Now, if you really don't remember, which I'm surprised if y'all don't, if you've heard that name before, it's because Dow Loggins was the offensive coordinator here in Columbia in the 2023 and 2024 seasons. So prior to his very short stint in Columbia, Anthony spent 3 seasons at TCU with Gamecock offensive coordinator Kendall Briles. And before that, he actually spent 3 more seasons with Briles at Arkansas. So for me, it's like, obviously when you lose a quarterback's coach, it's like, yeah, that's a guy, coaching Lenore Sellers. You want, if to lose the guy that, your new offensive coordinator wanted to bring with him, who's had experience with him for almost a decade in different places at college, I think that hurts. I think this hurts a little bit more than the average position group change you might see in general. But what also strikes me is just if you notice, this is already the second assistant quarterbacks coaching change we've had this offseason, because before we brought in Mike Anthony, Davis Cutter, the former assistant quarterbacks coach at South Carolina, was helping Mike Shula coach Lenore Sellers, and then kind of took a step back and started helping Mike Furry, of course, after Shula was fired. He now is the assistant wide receivers coach for the Bengals. So after Cutter left and now Mike Anthony is the offensive coordinator at App State, you're looking for another quarterbacks coach heading into spring ball, and time's ticking, of course. You have around a month. So you're hoping to find a guy who can build a relationship with that quarterback room and with your star number one athlete, number one player in Lenore Sellers before you get into the thick of spring ball and spring practice. But also, I think it's really interesting because, obviously a promotion such as obviously assistant quarterbacks coach to offensive coordinator's promotion. I'm not arguing that. However, considering the fact that Dow Loggins called plays last year, he didn't even have an offensive coordinator last year. I think if some are asking, well, why did he leave? I think I'd be surprised if he's not calling plays, if Anthony's not calling plays next year, because would you really leave a Power 4 assistant quarterback's job with a guy who you've known for over a decade and being able to coach a guy like Lenore Sellers, who in my opinion is the most gifted quarterback in the country, just to not call plays at App State? So I haven't heard about whether he will be calling plays next year, but I would sure be surprised if he's not. So that's the coaching staff movement. Now, to shift away a little bit more from the team itself and kind of more of the program in general, I want to talk about the home and home series cancellation that happened today. Now, you might be asking, another one? Yes, unfortunately. Our home and home series with NC State has been canceled. North Carolina State and South Carolina have both mutually agreed to cancel their home and home series. This was first recorded by the Wolfpacker, who did on X, who did an open records request to NC State. So both schools mutually agreed to cancel it. No one's going to have to pay the couple $100,000 fee of trying to cancel it just by themselves. And I think it's disappointing because this was it wasn't the near future, but it was in the near future in general. The Wolfpack were supposed to come to Columbia in 2030, and then we were going to head back to Raleigh in 2031. So not only do we lose a matchup, which I would have just liked to see in general, but also this is now the third ACC opponent where South Carolina has mutually agreed to cancel the home and home series. Now you might be asking, what are the others? You have NC State today, of course. That just happened earlier in the early afternoon. Virginia Tech in 2034 and 2035. Of course, we just played them in the Aflac kickoff last season. And then also Miami, 2026 and 2027. Yes, you heard that right. The Hurricanes were supposed to come to Williams-Brice, and I believe it was going to be the season opener in this upcoming season. Now, looking back, it might be good that they're not, national champion runner-ups and all. But it's just all of this is happening for a reason. It's not South Carolina's backing out. It's not South Carolina's scared to play ACC competition. It's not any of that. If anyone tells you that, they're lying or they're just an ACC super fan, whatever. They're just feeding you a bunch of bullcrap. It's happening because of the 9-game SEC schedule. It's happening because of the extra game we have to play against SEC opponents. Now, it's disappointing, but it's understandable. As you see conferences now trying to get to 9-game schedules in their conference, of course, against other teams, you have that happening, and you have pressure you have pressure as a university to put your team in the best position to win. Now, my question is, if anyone is mad at the fact that we're not about to play 11 Power 4 games next year, I would ask you this. from the head coach standpoint, Shane Beamer, from the athletic director standpoint, and Jeremiah Donati, and the university president's perspective, why would you play 11 Power 4 games? Why would you play 9 SEC opponents, Clemson at the end of the year, and then also another Power 4 opponent, which would have been an ACC if it was happening this season against a very highly ranked team, I believe, in Miami? Why would you do that when it's already been shown these past couple of years, strength of schedule is not as high where I think a lot of people and a lot of fan bases and teams and programs think it should be? We all saw this in 2024. That was probably the worst we saw of it when South Carolina, Ole Miss, and Alabama were all 9-3. They're asking, okay, why don't we get a serious consideration when SMU finished 10-2 with one of the weakest conferences in the Power 4? That was a valid argument. Yes, South Carolina lost 3 games that year. Ole Miss was an ugly loss, I'll admit. Alabama was a 2-point loss on the road. LSU was a 3-point loss at home, which I think everyone agreed was terribly officiated. And Lenore Sellers missed that second half due to an injury. Actually a little bit of the late in the second quarter as well. And we saw, despite the fact we went on a 6-game win streak to end the season and beat multiple ranked opponents and whooped Oklahoma and whooped Texas A&M, which I think was a top 15, top 10 team then, and beat a top 15 Clemson in Death Valley to end the season. Despite all of that, we only moved up maybe 1 spot after beating Clemson. So what's the incentive whenever you know that happened? What's the incentive when you know last year, if everybody likes to say, to the Texas fans who are mad about not making the CFP, well, the reason you didn't make it was because you lost to Florida. Now, of course, I think that's valid. I think that Florida loss was an ugly loss. But would you say the same thing if they hadn't played Ohio State in week 1? If they played a random FCS group of 5 team and they won? If they were a 10-2 team with that ugly Florida loss, yes, but only 2 losses, how would you treat that? How would you treat that? And I think when you look at these different contexts, it's pretty clear the lack of incentive to have a crazy strength of schedule. So you're already doing your part when it comes to the strength of schedule by playing 9 games. I think you could probably make the argument that it's too much and that we shouldn't have gone to it. That's only going to punish their bodies next season, and it's going to make us more worn out and more injury prone next year, especially with the fact there's only 1 bye week next year because the way Labor Day is set up, there's not 2 bye weeks next year. There's only 1. So how's that going to fare whenever we go against other conferences in the college football playoff in the postseason next year when we're all worn down and battered and battle worn and all that? So you've already made the strength of schedule standpoint by playing 9 games this upcoming season and for the future. Why, on top of playing a Clemson team that's 10, why I would not feel obligated to anybody whatsoever to play an 11th. If you try to get on to me for playing an 11th Power 4 game, I'll tell you first. You first. You go in my point of view and do it for a season, and then I'll do it. So that's my attitude on that. I think it's disappointing to see. I would have loved to see us travel to Raleigh and play NC State, or go to Hard Rock Stadium and play Miami or Virginia Tech and go see Enter Sandman and all that. Like, it would have been very cool, of course. From a fan point of view, it's disappointing. But from a program point of view, it's completely understandable. But I think we've had a really good show today. It's been one of my favorite shows we've had so far. I wanted to end it on a positive note. So with that being said, I want to take a moment to celebrate our Super Bowl champions, South Carolina's finest, on the biggest stage of college football. So just for those who maybe might not have known, I imagine most of you, if not all of you, know 3 Gamecocks were representing USC yesterday on the biggest stage in sports or in college or in football, the Super Bowl. Now, you might be asking, well, who's the third? Marcellus Style for the Patriots. Unfortunately, he didn't play preseason ACL tear, but he did make it to the NFL, made it to the Patriots. I want to include him because it's not his fault. It's not his fault he tore his ACL. I want to include him, just give him recognition for what he's done, making it into the league. He was a great cornerback here at South Carolina. Shout out to him. But to shift it to the winning team, of course, Seattle Seahawks Super Bowl 60, I think what it was, Super Bowl 60 champions. First guy I want to talk about is Ernest Jones. Jones was in Columbia 2018 to 2020. In his first season, he played 5 games, but he really broke out in his second season in the 19 season with a team high of 97 tackles, which is kind of crazy when you look back at it now. And he actually, after that season, I mean, it looked like he was going to have a stellar junior year, but preseason, he misses the preseason completely because of an appendix removal. And everybody, I think, was worried and really concerned. But he still ends up leading the team with 86 tackles, 5 tackles for loss, and he eventually becomes a third-round pick to the Los Angeles Rams in the NFL draft. So Ernest Jones was definitely a spotlight, if you ask me, for South Carolina, especially in the later Muschamp era as things tended to get a little more negative. But just shout out to Ernest Jones for the hard work he's done. I believe he's the only Gamecock ever to win 2 Super Bowls with 2 different teams, because he was on that 2021-2022 Rams team that did win the Super Bowl. They beat the Bengals and Joe Burrow, of course. But just shout out to Ernest Jones. If you didn't know, this season with Seattle, he had 151 tackles, half a sack, 1 forced fumble, 6 interceptions, and 8 pass deflections. And in the Super Bowl, he actually led his team in tackles that night with 11. So shout out to Ernest Jones, a great Gamecock linebacker, a great representation of this university. But also, this guy, he was my favorite on the defense when he played at South Carolina. He's probably a lot of people's favorites, especially right now. Nicky Minwari came to South Carolina as a 3-star recruit out of Irmo High School, right outside Columbia. It's maybe 15, 20 minutes to make it to the university if traffic's, fine and normal. And one thing is just at the high school level, the thing a lot of people noted about him was not only was he talented, but he seemed like the most athletic and oftentimes smartest person on that field. He made plays wherever it was needed, whether it was defending like the deep pass downfield, coming up and helping with the run game, getting to the quarterback, not letting him escape. It felt like he was a kind of a do-it-all, very talented safety. 3-star recruit out of Irmo High School, of course, underrated if you ask me, and I think he proved that. Came in his freshman season at South Carolina, impressed. I think it might have been that Arkansas game in 2022, I think, where Mo Kaba got injured and was out for the season. I think he tore his ACL, I believe. And Nicky Minwari, just freshman, just in high school, a couple months ago, came in and had a pretty solid first game. And until then, until the end of the 2024 season against Illinois, he continued to be a leader for this Gamecock defense. And once again, he was consistently noted as one of the most athletic, probably the most athletic person on that field, and one of the smartest. And I think you see that when you hear him break down his plays and when you hear about what he was thinking, such as in that 2024 LSU game, in that iconic called back pick 6, which I think haunts a lot of people's minds. It certainly haunts mine, probably will for a long time. You look at the way he broke down that play and the way he was able to predict what Garrett Nussmeier was thinking. I mean, this guy's smart. He's insanely smart. His football IQ is through the roof. Clayton White, especially that year, kind of gave the DBs certainly a little bit of freedom to kind of act on their instinct. And I think Nicky Minwari fully encapsulated that and fully took that opportunity. So that was great. And then, of course, that season in 2024, his third season in Columbia, I mean, it was his breakout year. First team All-American, led the team with 88 tackles, 3 tackles for loss, 4 interceptions that year, which was 4th in the SEC. And he was one of 3 players in the country with 2 pick sixes, one of only 3. I usually say 3 pick sixes. I always like to include that. One against LSU. I'm a little petty when it comes to that game. But just an impressive at the high school level, impressive at the college level, but also he's been very impressive in his rookie year in Seattle. 2nd-round pick to Seattle in last year's NFL draft. I think myself and a lot of the Gamecock fan base and community thought he should have been a 1st-round pick, but a lot of teams made the mistake of sleeping on him. And his rookie year was nothing short of stellar. 2nd in defensive rookie of the year voting. I think he should have won. Of course, that's also biased, but I just look at the plays, look at the fact that he missed time with the injury, and look at the fact of how he performed. 94 tackles, 2.5 sacks, 1 interception, and 15 pass deflections in the regular and postseason. I think he was the obvious pick, but I'm not the voter, so is what it is. But just how he did in Seattle this past year, just like he did at South Carolina, just how he did at Irmo High School, which is very close to the university. He's one of the most athletic and smartest players on the field. You look at his post-game interviews, he reflects a lot on who helped him to get to where he is and who supported him along the way. So congrats to Nicky Minwari for winning the Super Bowl. Congrats to Ernest Jones, 2 great South Carolina defensive players, linebacker and safety, and they're just a great representation of this university. The players they put, the quality of character they put out into the world, and how well this South Carolina, how this university can put players in the NFL. They're a great representation of that. So thank you, Nicky Minwari, and thank you, Ernest Jones. But that is going to be the kind of wrap up for this episode. South Carolina Live. At the Voice of College Football, episode 41. So just a big shout out and thank you to all of those who are watching. I see we have 21 viewers. If you haven't followed on X, I encourage you to weekly, daily, by-the-minute updates for Gamecock recruiting, game breakdowns, everything Gamecock football, and then, of course, great shows like this. So just a big shout out to those who are watching, of course. I hope you guys have a great week. Hopefully it gets a little warmer as we get closer to spring. But with that being said, have a good night. I'm your host, Walker Gaskins, and go Gamecocks.
College football is even more exciting when you've got some action on the line, and the games are even better when you're cashing in. And the Voice of College Football is the place to be to get the greatest value. Start with my picks. 75% against the money line, 58% against the spread, and I've got a 40-plus year track record. 11-0 in the college football playoff for me last year against the money line, 8-3 against the spread. And I'm just the warm-up act. Steve Merrill of Wager Talk is our ace in the hole, show stopper. 7 years with the Voice of College Football, over 30 years in the industry. Steve gives us analysis on all the big games, but you can't miss Steve's weekly under-the-radar pick. 28-12 against the spread the last 3 years. You also get picks from some of our top analysts here at the Voice of College Football, including Corey Bratta, Matt Zemek, and Steve Dace. Check out those numbers. Become a YouTube or Patreon member for just $99 per month. Go to the main channel on YouTube, click join, and then select the betting tier. Do the same thing on Patreon. Make 2025 a winner now.